Did you know that this scene from Forrest Gump is historically accurate?
I was so good that some years later, the Army decided that I should be on the All-America Ping Pong team. We were the first Americans to visit the land of China in like a million years or something like that.
Well, it wasn't a million years, and, it wasn't Forrest Gump, but let me explain. While China and the United States were both allies during World War II, their relationship quickly started to turn sour only a few years after the war in 1949. Okay, I promise this is relevant, just stay with me for a sec. At this point, the Cold War had begun, and the Soviet Union was forcing communism onto other nations. At the same time, the People's Republic of China had taken rule, also forming a communist country themselves, leaving the United States as the opposition. Tensions only grew from there, as the Korean War began in 1950 and the Vietnam War in 1965, leaving China and the USSR to support the communist movement in both North Korea and North Vietnam, and the US responding from South Korea and South Vietnam. Because of these factors, China had over time removed all American influence from their province, eradicating any diplomatic ties and restricting any trades, ultimately prohibiting any American citizens from entering the nation of China from 1949 to 1971. 22 years of bad blood. So not necessarily a million, but still quite a long time. But how did those 22 years come to an end? How did everything change in the matter of a moment? And almost unexpectedly so. Well, you already know because of the title and thumbnail, but I'm going to tell you anyways. At just 19 years old, table tennis player Glenn Cohen was competing for the US in the World Table Tennis Championship held in Nagoya, Japan. However, on the day of the tournament, coming late from practice, Cohen missed his team's bus to the stadium, leaving him stranded at the hotel. So, standing out on the street with no other option, he decided to hop on the next bus he saw, that being the Chinese team bus. After an awkward silent drive, China's team captain and three-time world champion Zhuang Zedong came up to the young American and offered a modest yet kind gift, a silk cloth art piece illustrating the Huangshan Mountains of eastern China. After this small gesture, Cohen then began to practice with some of the players of the Chinese team once they arrived at the stadium.
We were both around a similar age. I was just a year or so older. When we got to the stadium, he was too shy to ask to play with Zhuang, so he turned to me.
Pictures were taken depicting the two competitors overlooking their country's differences, and the feel-good story was quickly published in newspapers around the world. Then, on April 6, only 2 days after Zedong and Cohen were shaking hands, the American table tennis team was invited to Beijing, Shanghai, and Tianjin to play exhibition matches against China's team. Another 2 days later, 9 members of the US team, along with 4 officials and 2 spouses, touched down in China, making them the first Americans to step foot in the country for 22 years. Meaning, within the span of 4 days, the relationship between the US and China went from practically non-existent to 2 nations playing friendly matches of ping pong. All because of a player who missed their bus and a friendly offer from a stranger. The US team's stay went more than well. The Americans were eagerly welcomed by their host, playing in Beijing in front of nearly 20,000 fans who came to see the 2 nations compete. Although it wasn't much of a competition, as the US team says their opponents were more than often taking it easy on them out of politeness. But considering America's ranking in table tennis was an embarrassing 23rd compared to China's first place, I'm sure the US didn't mind at all. After the exhibition matches, the team got the opportunity to tour some of the greatest sights in the country, including the Summer Palace and the Great Wall of China. Really makes China's team visit to the US, which happened a year later, seem pretty pathetic. I'm sure they did more stuff during their stay, but all I could find when researching is that they played against the University of Maryland's table tennis team. That's all that's talked about. I mean, I just hope they got to see the great attractions the United States has to offer. I am recording this as editing. I found out they went to Disneyland, so all is well. Anyways, back to the Americans' journey in Beijing, where Zhao Enlai, China's premier during the time, had such a great appreciation for his guests that he said to them during their visit, "You have opened a new chapter in the relations of the American and Chinese people. I am confident that this beginning again of our friendship will certainly meet with majority support of our two peoples." And he wasn't joking, because 10 months later, in February of 1972, Premier Zhou would escort Richard Nixon as he visited mainland China, making him the first active president to ever do so. During his week-long stay, Nixon met with Chairman Mao Zedong, where they talked about, quote, philosophical problems between their two nations. And while I'm sure his visit wasn't as fun as playing ping pong and visiting the Great Wall, Nixon was able to walk away with a document agreement stating that both countries promised to work towards the full normalization of diplomatic policy. In simplified terms, friends. Okay, well, not friends, but like acquaintances. Oh, plus China gave the US 2 pandas after its visit. So maybe you could say friends. You know, you don't give pandas to just anyone, do you? But how did this simple visit from Nixon affect the results of the Cold War? Well, ever since the Sino-Soviet split in 1960, China's position with the USSR was at a standstill. And Nixon knew that if China and Soviet Russia ever renewed their alliance, the US would have no chance taking them both on. So once the US table tennis team paved the path into China's borders, it gave Nixon the chance to swoop in and form a treaty, tightening the relations between the two powerhouses and taking the upper hand away from the Soviets, ultimately giving an advantage to the US. And while it wasn't a quick fix to the war, historians agree that Nixon's association with China was a primary cause behind the USSR's eventual disbanding 19 years later in 1991. In a strange butterfly effect, something as inconsequential as a teenager missing his ride to a ping pong tournament eventually steered a war into his country's favor. Without Nixon's visit to China, who's to say how the Cold War would have ended? Or a matter of fact, if it would have ended at all. Today, the story lives on, referred to as the ping pong diplomacy, and contains an important lesson that we should all take heed of. Any bad blood can be fixed by ping pong. And pandas. Thank you all for watching. It's been a while since I posted. I've just been very busy with work and all that, but I promise there's more videos on the way, and I just thank you all for staying with me and, watching these silly videos, but thank you again. It just means the world. God bless, and thank you again.